Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all three past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single card today.
Hi everyone, David Aragona here with another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. The big prep this weekend is the Grade 3 Tampa Bay Derby, race 11 on a 12-race card at Tampa Bay Downs on Saturday. 1 mile and a 16th the distance for the 3-year-olds, with 10 runners signed on, competing for those 50 Kentucky Derby qualifying points that will be awarded to the winner of this race. We'll take a look at the field for this Tampa Bay Derby, and I think that the two horses that will likely vie for favoritism are the number 5, Domestic Product, and the number 7, No More Time, the former one of Chad Brown's top hopefuls for the Kentucky Derby, coming off a second place finish in the Holy Bull, and the latter, No More Time, coming off the local prep victory in the Grade 3 Sam F. Davis last month, looking to validate that performance against a slightly tougher field. And they're not facing the strongest group that we've seen assembled so far in the prep races, so it's not like either one's going to have to improve that much to beat this field, but there are some others in this race coming off maiden victories or maiden events that do have a right to improve. Plenty of horses with upside in this affair, so it's going to be interesting to see who was able to take that step forward on Saturday. Let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this race before we get into the main contenders, and there does appear to be plenty of speed signed on, and perhaps that's going to be more of a hurdle for the number 7, No More Time, to overcome than it will be for the other likely favorite in this race, Domestic Product, who's shown more of that ability to stalk. And you can see Domestic Product showed in a spot right in behind the leaders. I'm sure Chad Brown would be happy to pull that trip with this horse, but No More Time, I think the best thing you can say about him is that at least he's drawn outside of some of his main pace rivals, so Javier Castellano should be able to take up a stalking position just outside of horses like the number 2, Ever Do It, and the number 4, Good Money, who look like bigger prices in this race. But it's going to be interesting to see how fast they do go up front if this pace really does heat up. Note that the number 10, Sturdy, a maiden coming into this race, has the LP flag on the pace projector, indicating that he has the highest TimeformUS late pace rating in this field and could be closing fastest of all at the end of this race. Let's go through this field in post position order, beginning with the number 1, Heartened, a Todd Pletcher runner stepping up off a maiden victory into this race. We'll take a look at that most recent win at Tampa Bay Downs, going the distance of 1 mile and 40 yards, so only stretching out slightly to the 1 mile and a 16th distance on Saturday. And as you can see, he's a pretty dominant, comfortable winner of this race, but he was going off at 2 to 5, just not facing the toughest competition. A couple of horses have come out of this race to subsequently improve their speed figures slightly, but they were competing against Maiden Claiming Company next time out, which I think just speaks to the overall quality of the race that Heartened is exiting. He did show some promise on debut when no match for the top 2 finishers sprinting on the dirt, but did finish well that day after getting away a little bit sluggishly. They subsequently went to the turf with him. I wonder if that was just to get it out going around 2 turns, going a little bit longer, because he does feel like a horse that does want the distance. He's just going to have to get a little bit faster to get on terms with some of the favorites in this field, but he is one of the horses in this race that does appear to have some upside. The number 2 is Ever Do It, and he competed in the Sam F. Davis sort of last time, because as you can see from the comment, he hit into the gate and lost the rider right at the start and was really never actually competing that day. Went off at 127 to 1 on that occasion, so not much was expected of him, even if he had kept his jockey on his back that day. Has tried Stakes Company a couple of times now, actually did compete and finish the race 2 back in Mucho Macho Man, but after setting the pace was really no match for a field that included No More Time, who probably had more trouble than him on that occasion. So Ever Do It just has a tall order ahead of him on Saturday. The number 3 is Give Me Liberty. He is a maiden coming into this race, one of a couple of maidens in this field, and he's coming in for Robertino Diodoro after a couple of starts where he was second in maiden special weight company at Oaklawn the last couple of times. Has been beaten by some good rivals in those races, including 2 back when he was second to Common Defense, who has since earned 25 Kentucky Derby qualifying points when he was second in the Rebel Stakes, the Timberlake, a couple of weeks ago. Give Me Liberty came back last time out over a sloppy track at Oaklawn and was second to Dymatic. Now, while he only lost that race by 3 lengths, people might remember that was the race in which Dymatic was all over the stretch from the 8th pole to the wire. So that horse probably was more than 3 lengths superior to Give Me Liberty, who did get a pretty good trip, all things considered. He did spend some time on the rail early in that race when the inside really was the place to be on February 3rd, Southwest Day. So he's just going to have to take a step forward coming into this stakes debut, but I suppose he is one of the horses in this race that has some upside. You could say something similar about the number 4, Good Money, who will have to move forward in just the second start of his career, but at least this horse did show some promise on debut for Chad Brown, breaking his maiden, going 7 furlongs at Tampa Bay Downs in this race that we're looking at. Only got an 85 TimeformUS speed figure for this performance, but he just stays on steadily to the wire, holding off a well-meant Todd Pletcher first-time starter, acclaimed victor, to win this race. I will say that when you go back and watch the entirety of this race, it's hard to say that acclaimed victor didn't run the better race than Good Money, because that runner-up really had trouble getting away slowly at the start, had to pick his way through traffic, and that horse came back last weekend to significantly improve from a speed figure standpoint. I believe he was 4th in a very fast maiden race at Gulfstream Park, so that flatters the form of Good Money a little bit, but like I said, acclaimed victor is the one based on the trips that you would have expected would take a step forward out of that race. Now they're asking a lot of Good Money, stepping up to against graded stakes companies, stretching out for the first time. He does attract Irad Ortiz, but that could potentially drive down the price on a horse that probably should be double-digit odds in this race. The number 5 is Chad Brown's more fancied runner, the number 5 Domestic Product. He's coming off a second-place finish at a big price in the Grade 3 Holy Bull, where he really seemed to take a step forward, both from a development and mental standpoint in this race, because he was a little keen through the early stages, but not nearly as rank as he appeared to be early in the Remsen. Chad Brown did take the blinkers off for this race, and it was allowed Tyler Gaffalione to keep a lid on him through the early stages of this race. And furthermore, you can forgive him for getting a little bit keen in the early stages of that Holy Bull, because the pace really was backed down by the early leaders. You can see those blue color-coded pace figures for those first 2 fractions, both pace figures of 82 in TimeformUS. That's a pretty slow pace for that level of stakes race for the 3-year-olds. The winner of that race, Hades, has not run back yet, but he seemed like a horse that's moving in the right direction. And of course, Domestic Product did finish ahead of last year's 2-year-old champion Fierceness in that Holy Bull, but obviously we did not see the best version of Fierceness that day. It does seem like Domestic Product is figuring it all out. He's been training for this race, the last drill in company with Sierra Leone, Chad Brown's current Derby favorite, and it looked like Domestic Product was going just as well, if not a little better, when I watched that workout with Sierra Leone. So it seems like he's coming into this race thriving right now, and he does project to get a pretty good trip on Saturday. The number 6 is Katire Vizcaya, and he's just another horse that's really going to have to improve in this race. He broke his maiden against Auction Restricted Company at Saratoga last year, going 7 furlongs, then was unsuccessful when they tried to stretch him out around 2 turns at Delaware. Came back from a layoff last time at Tampa, sprinting, and just really didn't show much, was off a little bit slowly, never really involved in that race, despite the fact that the pace was fast. Though you will note that red color-coded race rating box in TimeformUS that indicates that it was a speed favoring day. And when you look through the charts from February 16th, there were many gate to wire winners. So potentially Katire Vizcaya was compromised by that track profile, but still he would have to get a lot faster. And it's unclear if he really wants to go the 2-turn distance. Number 7 is No More Time, and he was the winner of the local prep for this, the Grade 3 Sam F. Davis. We'll take a look at that victory here. And he just busted out of the starting gate, got to the front end in a race that appeared to feature other speed on paper, but he was the quickest of all into the clubhouse turn, set a legitimate pace, and was able to spurt away on the stretch, holding off the late charge of Agate Road at the very end of this race. This was a big step forward for No More Time, who had some trouble in his prior start of the Mucho Macho Man when he hopped up at the start, was off a bit slowly, had to make a wide middle move before flattening out that day. So you could have said with some confidence that he was better than the Mucho Macho Man result, but he still did take that meaningful step forward all the way up to the 111 TimeformUS speed figure that he earned for the last race. That makes him the fastest horse coming into this race. You will note the final time number for that Sam F. Davis was lower, but he did get a pace upgrade to the TimeformUS speed figure due to those red color-coded fast fractions. And that's a feather in his cap that he's already shown that he can handle a fast early tempo, because he's likely to encounter another one in this Tampa Bay Derby, and we'll see if he can run back and legitimize that performance. He wasn't a big secret last time, went off as the somewhat surprising 3-1 favorite, and he might be an even shorter price on Saturday. The number 8 is Crazy Mason. He's another horse coming out of the Sam F. Davis, and I liked him a little bit that day. I thought he was somewhat interesting, trying to move up to the graded stakes level, and he was just a little bit disappointing. He got pace to close into, but he came under pressure early on the far turn and really just could never make a dent on that race, just staying on at one pace, passing some tired rivals. The connections now are going to put the blinkers back on. He was wearing blinkers when he broke his maiden against Auction Restricted Company at Saratoga Sprinting last summer. They did get him to show more speed that day. I'm not sure if they really want Crazy Mason to show more speed in this race, because it does feel like there already is pace in this race. I think they're just looking to get this horse a little bit more focused, because he does sometimes look like he's stopping and starting in his races, not really putting in a full effort. We'll see if he can put it all together on Saturday, but he might just not possess the natural talent to compete at this level. The number 9 is Grand Mo the First, and he'll be making just the second dirt start of his career. He only got in the dirt for the first time last time out, coming off a layoff for his 3-year-old debut in the Swale Stakes, and got a decent trip that day, stalking in behind a group of leaders that were sort of fanned out across the track 5 wide, and Grand Mo the First was the one that was tracking by himself behind those horses. He swung out at the top of the stretch and just kind of stayed on at one pace, never looked like he was going to be the winner of that race, but he did earn a solid 103 TimeformUS speed figure. That's the fastest number that he's achieved so far. As a 2-year-old, he only stretched out once. That was on the turf out in California in the Zuma Beach, and again, he stayed on at one pace, but never really looked like he was producing much of a kick that day. So it's unclear what surface he really prefers, because he's run up to a similar level on all 3 surfaces. I'm just a little bit concerned that this distance at this class level might be a little bit much for him, but he does figure to be a square price in this race for a horse that has at least shown some ability in different situations. The number 10 is Sturdy, the horse that's drawn on the far outside, and he is another maiden coming into this race. We'll take a look at his most recent start at Gulfstream Park, when he came off a bit of a layoff in late February to pick up third, going the mile and an eighth distance. So he's also one of the only horses, I think the only horse in this race, that's going to be cutting back from a longer distance to the mile and a 16th. You could say in mid-stretch, it briefly looked like this horse might mow this field down and get there, but he just hangs a little bit in the late stages, ultimately settles for third after it looked like he was going to finish no worse than second at the 8th pole, but it was a step forward from a speed figure standpoint. He got a solid 106 TimeformUS speed figure for that performance, beaten by a couple of horses that had already shown quality coming out of a fast maiden race, including Corporate Power, who is a horse that I know some people are excited about for trainer Shug McGahee. And Sturdy has just been steadily stepping forward from a speed figure standpoint. He was beaten by good horses as a 2-year-old, Locked and Drumroll Please, those future stakes winners on debut, and then 2 back when he was only beaten by today's rival Domestic Product. And arguably, he had the tougher trip that day because he was trying to close into a slow pace. I think Sturdy might be one of the best horses in this race down the line later in the season, but they're asking a lot of him, because you can see listed in those TimeformUS PPs, the top running line. He's coming back in just 14 days, which makes me feel like maybe this race was a bit of an afterthought when George Weaver and the connections, including Mike Rapoli, saw this race was coming up a little bit weak. So we'll see if Sturdy is able to make that transition into stakes company, but he does feel like one of the more intriguing contenders with upside in this Tampa Bay Derby. Let's throw my picks for this Derby prep in Florida on Saturday, and I'm not going to make it too complicated. I'm going with the number 5 Domestic Product. I just like the mental progression that he's shown through his recent starts. I think taking the blinkers off really helped this guy last time, and it just feels like he's really training up to a good effort based on what I've seen from him in the morning. So the number 5 Domestic Product is my top pick, but I am intrigued by that number 10 Sturdy, even as he comes back on short rest, being a maiden coming into this graded stakes race. But like I said, the number 5 Domestic Product, my top pick in the Tampa Bay Derby on Saturday at Tampa Bay Downs. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.